Welcome to Maximal Being,
a podcast devoted to ditching fad diets and using real science to get you healthy and feeling great.
I'm Doc Mok, a GI and functional medicine doctor who harnesses the power of gut health to get you achieving your goals.
And I'm Jackie P., a well-informed layman who challenges the experts and asks the questions that you want.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button or leave a comment.
And now, on to the show.
Jackie, have you ever analyzed any of your genetics or?
I haven't. And I was curious about that because, I always wonder, how strong your genetics do play, right? I think, we see genetics in other ways, how people look like their parents or talk and act. But I was always curious on how strong those genetics can play against your health, right? Is it something where, is that also a mix as well? Or is it something where sometimes no matter what you do, your genetics are just so strong that you're kind of, as you said, Joe, right? You kind of won that bad genetic lottery, right? Like it's going to be an uphill battle from the start. So I was just curious, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think you can have a very powerful impact on your genetics. You have your susceptibilities, just like it's clear that I had them, right? Other 13-year-old kids did not have the same problems as me, right? So it's clear that I had the genetic susceptibilities. And it's also clear that as time goes on, usually problems get worse, not better. I would say that mine was quite strong because they came on at such an early age, whereas you really start seeing these problems when people are like 30, 40, you kind of see like when you're 20, you could like scarf down, 20 pizzas. You wouldn't really feel it. All of a sudden when you're like 30, 40, 45, whatever it is, you're like, I can't do that anymore. You're starting to get some brain fog after eating the whole 5 pizza. And by the way, this is not my personal experience as much as taking a survey of other people. Like, I asked everybody like, oh, how do you feel after this? How do you feel after that? I'm just one of those people that ask random questions to people. I'm known as like the guy who asks 1,000,001 questions to everybody. How do you feel after beans? Like, where's the question coming from?
Right.
I'm just a curious
Lectins.
person.
Yeah,
exactly. But but it's clear that as people get older, their problems get worse. And it's also clear that there's some people who are 80 that never have these problems, and there's people who are young that do. And so there is a very strong genetic element. Now there's also extremely strong environmental elements. If there weren't, then I would be doomed to a life of these issues. Whereas I would say in all these issues, I see the problems that I dealt with now in other people in various degrees. And you could say that in some ways that's an advantage, because having strong mental health issues, really, really strong mental health issues, and a lot of, whether it's OCD, anxiety, depression, I can identify that in other people and really sympathize with that. But I would say that I don't have to deal with any of those issues now. And there was a trajectory of different issues that I solved at different points, right? First it was like my brain issues because I couldn't function. I had to drop out of school. I was a real wreck. I don't know if you guys realize like how much of a wreck I was. I couldn't be in school. I couldn't have relationships. I was antisocial because of the physical and mental health issues, right? You really just want to withdraw. I was unemployed, couldn't get a job. And I think I had quite a lot of potential. Again, certain aspects of me were intelligent, clearly. Like I made certain very key decisions in my life that I think were very smart, but I didn't have the ability to actually do anything, to accomplish anything. And so I was living a very, very isolated life. It was just, it was something that I just realized this is not sustainable. And I'd say that my life now is the exact opposite, quite social. Before the age of 32, I'm 35 now, 30. Yeah. I never drank alcohol actually, because my body just was not robust enough for it. I was just one of those people. It's like, I just don't, I can't handle it. Right. Lo and behold, I'm like in Tel Aviv, I'm drinking more alcohol than I've ever. And again, I'm not like bragging. It's done in a different way. In California, it was like there was like competitions, who's cooler, who could drink more. But here it's actually like more relaxed. It's just like you go
Social.
out with friends, it's social, it's just normal. You have a couple drinks and again, so it's like I went from living a very, very abnormal life, whereas like I got a lot of dates, got dates all the time, got a date right after this podcast.
No, that's great.
Watch out now. Set a flex,
Yeah.
set a flex.
Yeah. No, I've got a great job with. There's a lot of things that we're building that's really cool. It's hard to even go through it. It would take an hour really to describe some of the highlights of what we're building. But my social life, everything has really turned around massively. Like there were some people from my youth that were like, "Are you still antisocial?" I'm like, "No, I'm like really social." Like I just had a party at my place with 150 people.
Nice.
It's just it's a game changer. And you could see based on my output, I didn't do anything before the age of 26. Like what were my accomplishments? Zero. Between the age of like 27, 28 already, 28 I started I built some really cool stuff that people could see. So I've been a productive machine, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think so. Just getting back to our topic, I think that there are certain genetic stop points, right? There are certain genetic conditions that if you have it, you can't do much to biohack or change, right? Like Huntington's chorea, or my patients that have Lynch syndrome, which you will eventually get some sort of cancer. But for the rest of us that have these SNPs, these subtle changes, that you can actually change the epigenetics, so the expression of those genes, and impact your outcomes and have a very successful life like Joe's having here. And I think that, you can go Googling and you can do your own research on PubMed. And again, we encourage all of our clients and all of our listeners to do their own research, but with something like genetics, it can get so overwhelming. And so that's where software and AI technology really comes into play, to be able to really, explain these changes, determine if they are significant, determine what the literature is. And so, I mean, in my own personal experience, I have Gilbert's syndrome genetics, which Gilbert's is involved in detoxifying things that are made through the liver. And people that have Gilbert's are not quite as good as that. So I'm more prone to toxin exposure. So I have to be aware of toxin modulation. But then I have other SNPs that have no significance to anything, related to my health. And all the research is in C. elegans, which are like these, little eel-like things. So those probably will never cause any problems for me. So I think that using software, using your resources is a really important thing in biohacking your genetics. Jackie, you think we should go to a commercial break?
Yeah, let's take some time to let everyone kind of digest what they just heard, right? Pun 100% intended. I don't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back with some hot seat questions for Joe.
What's going on, Maximal Beings? It's Doc Mock here. Many of you are returning to the gym now, but some are not going back. Regardless of what you plan, Rogue has got the right gear to fit your needs. I personally own a barbell set and love it. The Black Ops shorts are sweat resistant and flexible for getting deep in your squats. Head on over to maximalbeing.com/rogue for our referral link. Order 3 items and they ship for free. And as usual, it's Doc Mock, and I'm here to maximize your pathway to wellness. If you're stuck at home and cannot make it to the grocery store, delivery may be the best way to stay clean and healthy. Instacart is the national leader in the direct-to-home delivery service. With numerous major chains and food from smaller stores, you can get those local veggies sent directly to your doorstep. Head on over to maximalbeing.com/Instacart and maximize your nutrition today.
Welcome back, everyone. It is I, Jackie P. We've been talking with Joe Cohen here, telling us about his journey of, I'd say, really just, we call it biohacking, but, in your brain, when you hear hack, right, you think it's something that's straight to the point, but Joe, you had a very long journey, right? Like you had a lot of trials, tribulations, right? Peaks and valleys, just getting to understand, what was it that made you successful from a health perspective? And I think one thing that's interesting, a lot of folks should realize is, Joe did this successfully, right? In understanding his genetics and how that gives him a disposition to be, to what to look out for. But folks, let's not be Joe in a good way, right? There are resources out there, right? There's plenty of opportunities out there and resources specifically, right, that you can use to understand your genetics, understand those cursors, those markers, excuse me, and take advantage of, science and technology today, right? So Joe, before we get into the questions, I had one quick question for you about Self-Decode, which is the software that you use. Do people typically come to you for hey, I have an illness or I have the sickness, I'm not feeling too well, and they're looking for a solution? Or is this something that almost, every demographic can come to you for? Is it something like, maybe athletes come and say, hey, listen, I just want to, squeeze out against the competition and see if I can be more efficient with my diet? Like what do you see people coming to you for? And what would you say is like typically the most common solutions that your team provides?
That's a great question. I think it's probably about 50-50. So there's people who are definitely looking to solve specific problems, and then there's people who just want to optimize what their situation. And I think from both perspectives, it can be quite smart, right? I always like to give you an example, and this is kind of how I thought. If you can optimize your health by 10%, right? The amount of dividends that will happen, that will provide over a lifetime is pretty dramatic. I mean, I would say my health improved. I mean, it's hard to quantify numbers, but like by an order of magnitude, and I think that it was a combination of a lot of things that I did over time. It wasn't just like, oh, I did this one thing and now my whole life has changed. It was a process, and getting the correct information based on your blueprint is very important. Now, I also think that you have to be really careful. So, just to be clear, you're getting this test for under $100, right? Just the kit. It gives you 83 million variants, and you have it for the rest of your life. To me, that is a no-brainer, right? And you get access to this platform that's some more money, but another under $100 and another $97, whatever. You get access to this platform that can give you a crazy amount of information. And the way I think about it is, even if you improve 10%, the dividends are over your lifetime is tremendous. And so I think it's a no-brainer for everybody, really. And it's not just because I'm dogmatic about it. If you really just look at this from a first principles way, finding 1, 2, 3 things that really work for you it can be a game changer if you keep those things for the rest of your life. And I basically, I've stopped whatever didn't work and I've continued what does. And every so often I find a new thing and I'm like, this is great, right? And again, a lot of it is informed by my genetics. I can give you an example of that. Just to an interesting example. It's clear from that I had a lot of genetic variants that were causing a problem in serotonin. And so, based on my recommendations for mental health, a lot of them are good recommendations, and a lot of them increase serotonin as well. So those were a game changer for me to know that my serotonin was, something that needed to be increased, right? Because not everybody who has mental health issues has a problem with serotonin. There's different neurotransmitters that could be the problem. Sometimes it's GABA, sometimes it's dopamine, sometimes it's glutamate, right? For me, it was clear the strongest one was serotonin, and I only figured that out through genetics. Meaning it gave me the hints. Nothing is like super clear cut usually, just to be clear, but it gave me the hints that I then said, why am I not focusing more on these things that increase serotonin? I also kind of had the sense that, wait, I had these genetic variants. You know what? I had noticed that the things that increase serotonin are actually good for me. And so then I just, I focused on the things that increase serotonin. And by the way, we have posts on self-decode for all these things. You could say, ways to increase serotonin, right? And so that it's not just a genetics, it's also an encyclopedia. It's also a place to upload labs, but that's besides the fact. But and by the way, none of this stuff existed previously when I was starting out. So I literally was reading through tens of thousands of PubMed articles. Not the most efficient thing, right? And it's like, I would have much rather that all this stuff was just ready to go and it would be much easier. Instead, for me, I couldn't have like a normal job. I'm like too busy reading about my health, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so
yeah,
it was a good thing I got into this field and I got to be, but now, I'm 98% of my time is running businesses and things like that. But I still just have that exposure. I learn new things. And so, then I figured out that when you increase serotonin, you also decrease dopamine. And so that was an interesting thing. And I also figured out that, just this would happen to be through experiments. My genetics didn't say I was low in acetylcholine or anything, but I just said, like, let me try to take more acetylcholine, things that increase acetylcholine and see what would happen. My sex drive went down. It's like a bunch of things went down. Yeah. So it turns out that when you increase acetylcholine, dopamine goes down. You increase serotonin, dopamine also goes down. That's why I think, by the way, people, there's like a huge community of people who take SSRIs and they've got no libido, right?
Yep.
It makes sense. Your dopamine is responsible for your, like, very in large part.
Yeah.
And so I was like going on the serotonin, then I did the acetylcholine with it. All of a sudden my dopamine goes down a lot. And, that the dopamine is also really important for creativity, by the way, right? And so I start to notice I'm less creative as well. I was like, okay, this is interesting. Now I cut back on the acetylcholine. My serotonin is still good, but I also increased my dopamine because I also had some variants that in certain places of the brain, my dopamine is good. In certain places, my production of dopamine is not good. Right. And so
there's the breakdown too with methylation and COMT, right? That's also
correct.
Yeah, that's also
correct. So when I experimented with dopamine, the things that increase dopamine insert like the prefrontal cortex, like amphetamines, Adderall or something like that, it actually made me worse because I already have high dopamine there. The stuff that just increased the production of dopamine actually basically did all the other things. Like I've noticed I became more creative. So this is kind of like, you could see I'm having fun with this, right? I'm at a stage where I'm just like, oh, let me try this. I look at some information here. It's just information all over the place comes out, and it's just interesting to read it all the time.
As an aside, we do not recommend stopping any psychiatric medicines without the guidance of your healthcare professional. To be very harmful to your health. Just
correct. Yeah. I'm not either condoning.
No. Just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah.
You never know. Sometimes folks, they hear something and they hear a different message than what was intended to be put out there, right?
Paleo, keto, vegan, and carnivore. Maybe you've tried them all, but did you have success? Are you still doing that diet? Turns out there's not just one diet right for one particular person. By understanding how your body works and the relationship behind your body's workings and these diets, you can then approach the perfect plan for you. In the Perfect Human Diet course, we talk to you about your body's inner workings and the pros and cons of each plan. We discuss how our ancestors ate and have eaten, and lay a framework to tailoring a plan that is perfect for you. To learn more about the Perfect Human Diet course, head to maximalbeing.com/courses to find out more. And as always, I'm Doc Mok, and I'm here to maximize your health. You cannot supplement your way to health, but there are things that we need to add to our lives that can maximize our pathway to wellness. The American diet is virtually devoid of omega-3 fatty acids, which play a major role in cardiovascular disease, gut permeability, and mental health. Personally, I take omega-3s every night, and iHerb is the best place for clean, natural sources of supplements. I love the ZenWise omega-3 fatty acid supplement, which is free of fish burps and good for the environment. Head on over to maximalbeing.com/iHerb, that's IHERB, and enter the code B as in boy, D as in dog, B as in boy, 5528, and receive 10% off your orders for all supplements. Maximize your supplements with iHerb.
But that's very interesting. And I think you might have some good answer for us here, Joe. Especially since you did a lot of different experimentation from the nutrition and diet exercise. So we're gonna get with these questions, and I might have one or two extra in the chamber. But the first one is, what is your favorite health book and why?
So I actually don't read health books.
Okay.
And the reason is because they're not personalized. I read the self-decode reports. I'm not kidding. It's just like, why would I read it's either I'm just very skeptical and I'm like, I'm just gonna read PubMed or self-hack, because I know the stuff that we wrote is good quality. There's a lot of research there. Or now we put a lot of that on self-decode now. But either I'll read that stuff, and it's way more. I could get so I'm the type of guy that watches TV on 2x speed sometimes, because I just need things to go faster, right? So yeah, I mean, books are by definition very long. There's a lot of filler. I'm like, just give me all the information I need as quickly as possible, without the filler. And that's how I designed our content. There's no random filler nonsense. You get the information you need. And the genetics is a game changer too, because now I just, it gives you the information that you need for you, right? I don't need to read a whole book about it. I mean, it could be entertaining sometimes if you just like the process of reading a book. That's a different story. But if you want information, which is what I'm doing, I'm not a novels guy. I want information, right? I think.
So what would you say was your favorite? What's your most recent? I guess you can maybe, within the last year, or maybe if you have one, what's the most recent, let's say, PubMed, I guess, article you've read that you felt was oh wow, this is, groundbreaking, right? Almost like the apple for Newton, right? What would you say something that you read in those articles that really got your brain, the gears turning in your brain?
I'd say probably, a few weeks ago is what I learned about the neurotransmitters, because I was just all this acetylcholine stuff is making my libido go down. And, it's I noticed it's making me less good in social situations as well. I'm like, what's the key here? It's dopamine. So it's definitely decreasing dopamine. Same with the serotonin. I was I just started finding PubMed articles that saying that serotonin is antagonistic to dopamine, and same with acetylcholine. So that was, I would say, that was the most recent thing I read. That was, I would say, again, I'm reading things every, I'd say there's new game changers every few months.
Yeah.
By the way, acetylcholine is one of the biggest neurotransmitters in the gut. It does so much, and it's part of the parasympathetic, so that rest and digest nervous system. It's the main neurotransmitter. So it'll make you feel rested and digested,
Right.
The Food for Me study is a good one for you if you have not read that already. It's basically people that were placed on dietary programs based upon their genetics, and they did better than the group that did not do that. So Food for Me study, if you have not already.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, there's yeah, I mean, if you want to get into, I have a lot of opinions on the the genetic space as a whole, what people need to watch out for. I don't know if you guys want to get into that.
Maybe next time. I think we're running short on time.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, exercise. What would you say is your favorite exercise?
By far volleyball, beach volleyball.
Oh,
Oh,
beach
beach volleyball.
volleyball. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's
the
fun.
equation is pretty simple because it's one of the lowest injury prone sports. Um, I mean, I've been playing it for 4.5 years. I only got one sprain during that whole time.
Oh, wow.
Now, yeah, you're gonna get injured from everything probably. Just walking down the street, you'll hit a pole
Right.
once in a blue moon or something. You
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
I would say it's a very low injury. It's got cardio. You go through sprints. You get it. You're outside, fresh air.
Running in sand, right? Good
Yeah, in the
resistance.
sand. Exactly. So I love that. Yeah, for me it works.
Okay, nice.
Nice.
I recently, small side story about Jackie P. I just realized that I'm not that bad at volleyball. Also, it helps being 6'6",
Yeah, I was
but
gonna
I've
say
never
the
played
height,
before.
man. You're just
But
like,
yeah. Cool. All right. And last but not least, and I feel like you might have some good insight or just heard some
yeah.
good stories. What is the craziest diet you have tried or heard of?
Oh, I mean, I've tried all the crazy diets. So I tried veganism. I mean, I tried like the 80% of my fat food is fat diet. Like, I don't
Oof.
know. And I
Ouch.
tried a carnivore type diet. I tried all of them. I don't know. I guess it depends on how you define crazy. But I did try all the all the diets pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
80% fat is a lot.
That is a lot of fat.
That
I
is
was
a
just about to
lot
say
of
that.
fat.
I was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, oh, they're telling me I need more fat on everything. Okay, just like
Man,
taking tablespoons of like
you must
coconut
have had,
oil.
yeah, there's probably like one good gut bacteria left in your entire intestinal tract.
Yeah.
All right. Well, where can people find you, Joe?
Selfdecode.com is the main way. And then on Instagram, I'm Mr. Biohacker. Yeah, I think people will really like the program. It really is the best program out there by far. We didn't really get to go into exactly how it works, but it really is. I mean, yeah, it's really the best program out there.
For the listeners out there, they've generated a special code for you, DocMok. That's D as in dog, O, C as in cat, M as in Mary, O, K, 10. Enter that at checkout and you may get some free goodies. So really appreciate you coming on, Joe. And Jackie P, do you have anything else going on in your day or your life?
No, I'm really curious about, learning about my genetics, and, I never felt like I have any ailments, but, like there's always room for improvement, right? And maximizing, right? Pun intended again,
Yep.
your health and your wellness. So, Joe, I might be hitting you up for some of your assistance.
Sounds good. Sounds
Yeah.
good. Looking forward.
If anybody has any questions for Joe or any one of our other guests or Jackie P or myself, email us at team@maximalbeing.com or head on over to maximalbeing.com. Again, that kombucha course, I don't know what we've been doing on this podcast, but people are buying that thing. So thank you all for your support. And we look forward to maximizing your health.
What's going on, Maximal Beings? Doc Mock here. If you haven't done so already, leave us a comment and hit the subscribe button. Let your friends and family know. That way we can get the word out and continue to bash the bro science.